What is this?
Ties.
Ties. So boys, when you start working, right, you're going to have to start looking for ties. If you're going to be working in an office environment, most likely you're going to be required to wear a tie every once in a while. So you have to start considering the designs and how they match the shirts and probably your suits. Someone said bolsa, right? So handbags, as well as some jewelry. So the jewelry obviously has to be made out of some sort of cloth or fabric in order for it to be shown. And backpacks. So it's seen everywhere. You can see it in shoes, you can see it in hats. You just have to be aware. Okay, so textile designs can be a variety of shapes and colors, patterns, and motifs. Like I said, it can be from something very, very simple to something very ornate. A lot of design, very complicated shapes. Just depends on what you're trying to show it on and what it's intended for. So if you're doing something more modern, most likely it might be slightly simpler. But if it's something that's going to be for, let's say, a carpet or a rug, rugs can be very ornate, a lot of design, a lot of details. So you got to consider what it's being used for. So there's a few things you consider when you're creating your textile designs. Remember this when you're making the patterns and each of the thumbnails. Number one is balance. We're going to go over these in a little bit. Number two is shape. So do you want it as like squares and triangles, or do you want it more like flowers and leaves? Pattern. Do you want a pattern? Do you want it to look repeating? Do you want the shapes to be repeating? And color. So do you want to use warm colors, cool colors? Remember the color schemes we went over. Okay, so the first thing to consider was balance. And with balance, you can create visual weight. It's a way of giving stability to the artwork or to the design. And there's three types of balance. So these are things to consider when you're creating the designs. Do you want it to be symmetrical? Do you want it to be asymmetrical or radial? So symmetrical is when you split down the middle of some sort of artwork, such as example in this one that we see here. And the objects on each side are identical, so they're a mirror image. So what do we see in the design?
Pattern.
Some sort of pattern, right? Can you tell what the patterns are?
Blue, like a blue flowerish thing, and then a red.
Okay, let me zoom in a little more so you can see.
People with like headphones.
Yeah, right? And they even have some smiley faces on them, some of them. So if I were to split this down the middle, you can see that the design is pretty much symmetrical on each side, except, you know, the colors vary. For the most part, it's symmetrical. It's the same. What do you notice on people's faces? What happens when I split a face down the middle? Symmetrical, right? So face is symmetrical as well. And this really gives it a very stable sense of balance. Everything's the same. So when you're doing some of this, it has to be perfect on each side. It has to look exactly the same for the design to work. So if you're even slightly off, it's not going to look good. It's going to feel unbalanced. It's going to be strange. So when you're creating a symmetrical design, it has to be very balanced. It has to be done very well in order for it to look good. Because otherwise then, it just feels strange.